Hey folks, I wanted to give you a run through of laying out a hip rafter. So for this hip rafter, we're going to use the same scenario as we had for our common rafter. And so we have a 9/12 roof, but because this is a hip rafter, we have 9 over 16.97, and I filled up my rafter sheet. So our line length for this rafter, 31 7/8, and our total line length, that's from ridge to tail, is 38 1/4. So I'm going to start off the same way as we do with our common rafter. I got my framing square set to 9 here, and I've got it set to 17 here, 16.97. We're going to round it up to 17. So I'm going to start again right from the corner and make that mark. Okay, and I've got a nice sharp pencil going on right now. I'm going to measure down 31 7/8. You can see that. And we've got 38 1/4. Okay, and I'll make my plumb cuts, or my plumb lines rather, right on those lines. And okay, so now because we're doing a hip rafter, it is not as simple as a common rafter. We have to do some different shortenings. So up here at the ridge, what we're gonna do, let's zoom out a little bit. All right, what we're gonna do is we have to do our double cheek cut here up at the ridge. So what we do is we are going to subtract half the thickness of our ridge, but now it's half the thickness of the ridge at a 45-degree angle. So instead of 3/4 of an inch, it's half the thickness on a 45, which is 1 1/16. So 1 1/16. So now that is the center of our pointy double cheek cut. So I'm going to make that out of pencil. Okay. Now, to make the double cheek cut, the pointy double cheek cut thing, we need to come forward and back of that line. So this represents the center pointy part, and we're going to come over half the thickness of our rafter, 3/4 of an inch, and half the thickness of our rafter, 3/4 of an inch this way. So we come forward and back 3/4 of an inch. And I'm marking this with pen so it's a little bit more noticeable for you. Okay? So that one's one of our cheek cuts, and this is the other part of our cheek cut. We're going to end up cutting this line first, and we're going to end up cutting this line second. So cut that first, and then that one second, and then that way we'll have both of our lines. So I'm going to show you guys at the end of the video how I actually cut that out. So why don't we go right to the very tail of the rafter right now and do the same thing. So now we're going to come forward, or come back, we're going to shorten our rafter by the full thickness of our fascia at a 45. So instead of 1.5 inches, it's 1.5 inches on a 45. So that's 2 1/8 inches, okay? So that is, again, the center of the pointy part of that double cheek cut, okay? So we'll make that mark. Now again, to make our double cheek cut, we're going to come forward and back half the thickness of our rafters. So if we were using 1 3/4 material like an LVL, it would be different, but because we're using 1.5 inches, it's 3/4 forward, 3/4 backwards, and we have our layout mark, okay? So we make that mark, and we make this mark. Okay, and so again, I'm going to start from the outside. We're going to cut this one first and this one second, and that way when we cut this one, this line will still be maintained. If we were to cut this line first, we would end up cutting off our original line and we wouldn't be able to see it anymore, okay? So we're not cutting that line, we're not cutting that line, we're cutting that line. So here we have our building line, okay? Now, for our common rafter, our height above plate was, oh well gosh, I'm forgetting what it was, 4 5/8. 4 5/8 of an inch. So we use the same height above plate as our common rafter, okay? So I'm coming here, I'm burning it, I'm holding it at 10, I'm gonna mark 4 5/8, okay? And we can make that mark. Now, the easy thing to do for our hip rafter is to drop our hip. So what we could do is we could take this thing through the table saw and rip the corner off so our plywood comes and sits onto that hip rafter nicely. but the easier way to do it is to drop it. So in order to drop the hip, you could do all kinds of fancy math, or you can do it with layout. So here, we're gonna come forward, and by forward I mean towards the ridge, by half the thickness of our rafter. Again, 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I'm gonna make a new plumb line. You see I'm doing this out of pen this time, okay? Now, we're going to redraw the 4 5/8. 4 5/8. And when we go to cut this, we're gonna cut this all the way back to the original building line. So I'll do it with marker to show you where we're actually cutting this out. So we're actually cutting that out. So if you see what we did, is we came towards the ridge by half the thickness of the rafter. We came towards the ridge by 3/4 of an inch. We redrew our height above plate here, and what that did is, if you look, this is how much we're gonna be dropping it. So we're actually gonna cut that line all the way back to that original building line, but because we're cutting on the new seat cut line, the rafter ends up dropping, in this case, by about 3/8 of an inch. And by dropping it by 3/8 of an inch, what that'll do is it'll end up removing that corner, getting that corner out of the way for our plywood to come and land. All right, let me see if I can zoom out far enough so we can cut this rafter. All right. Sorry for the shakiness here. All right, so we're on the end. Hopefully you can see that okay. All right, I got my safety glasses on. I'm going to turn my saw to 45 degrees and lock that in place. I'm going to cut my first line first, I'm going to cut my second line second. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to cut this. So you can see what that first cut has done. It's created a single cheek cut. And now I'm going to come in from the other direction and cut it off. So now, by cutting both lines, what we've done is create a double cheek cut. And that point is in exactly the center of the rafter. Okay? So I hope you guys find that helpful. Just for the other cuts, just to kind of let you know, down here at the fascia, you would make the same double cheek cut, and then you could miter your corners, or you can overlap your fascia to line up on that, and it'll be the same. And here at your building line, you're just gonna cut that out straight. So we would set this saw back to 90 degrees, cut in, and that would be it, okay? I hope you find this helpful, guys, and let's keep practicing.